Hello and welcome to this Business Central Launch Events session. Today we're going to talk to you about how you can create customer-centric onboarding experiences. My name is Søren and I'm a product manager in the Business Central engineering team. I'm here today with Sarah, who's a UX designer in our design studio. Let's start by framing the problem. The problem is customers love Business Central. So do we, and so do you. Well, is that a problem? Well, it kind of is a problem because there are so many customers who would like to go to Business Central that they're queuing up outside our door, outside your door, in such a way that you struggle with serving them all. And that's a risk, because the risk is, one, they will find another partner, or even worse, they will find another product. So we need to figure out a way to scale the channel even more. There are simply not enough human resources to go around. Luckily, we have tools in the toolbox that can help us all and you to do just that. Before we go there, let's start by looking at the onboarding vision that we have. The vision is simply that any customer can find, explore, and start using Business Central Plus add-on apps by themselves. Now, notice the emphasis on start using. It doesn't mean that all companies will become 100% proficient without any assistance. And by themselves doesn't mean without partners, but it means that maybe there's an opportunity to rethink how you as a partner are involved in the process. What can you do with less hands-on and more digital guidance? To help us execute towards that vision, we see at least four things being necessary. One of them is, it's super important that we match and prospects and customers are matched with partners, the right partners, and the right solutions from day one, so that their very first meeting with the product is as great as it can be. Next is, our onboarding philosophy is not to drag all users through all setup. No, it is to template as much as possible and then let users self-serve and self-finalize the rest of the experience. That can be an evaluation experience in a trial, but it could also be in a live setting where they need to set up the system ready for productive use. And to that end, we'd like you to think about how you can take the knowledge of your consultants and pack it into some IP, into some apps for App Source. Now, you have domain knowledge and you have things that you do over and over again. And that work that you do over and over again are great candidates for being packaged into some digital guidance, asking the customer questions inside the product, leading to some onboarding scenarios where your consultants can then move on and instead serve, I'd say, more complex problems, more complex scenarios, and help customers that have those needs, instead of focusing and spending time on all the basics. Finally, it's super important that any user can learn while doing. Inside the product, a user needs to be able to intuitively understand what's a feature about, why does the page exist, what's the next logical step. Of course, there are some complex scenarios out there that a consultant will need to guide the user, but think about how you can support that kind of a learning journey. So to summarize, there's a huge opportunity out there. There are so many customers that want to go to BC. That's also a risk. So make sure that you're set up to handle that risk. Now, scale is critical. We simply need to scale more. And you can scale more with the same resources if you invest in these onboarding capabilities. And how you do that is driven by automation. And that's what this session is all about. So, enough with the business motivations for investing into onboarding. Let's talk about the human side, the more emotional side of onboarding to a new service or to a new thing. So, Sarah, I wondered, can you talk to us about what does it mean to onboard to something new, and how have we brought that philosophy into Business Central?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Søren. Here you see someone entering a hotel in a new city where he has never been before. So he's a little uncertain if he's at the right place. But hopefully he will get a warm and personal welcome, and he will feel expected and comfortable, finding his way around and getting the most out of his stay. Trying out a new product for the first time can be a bit similar. You can be a little uncertain if you're at the right place, and maybe even a bit overwhelmed by all the information. So having a clear indication of where to start and being able to find your way around is really important for a good first experience. And what we found in our studies is that while some users like to go and explore on their own right away, others might need a little more hand-holding along the way. So when designing the onboarding framework for Business Central, it was crucial for us to really cater for both of these two types of users, ensuring we didn't block the path to anyone, yet still making sure that we had relevant, in-context guidance along the way to getting productive with Business Central. Today, you will hear more about how you as a partner can scale this onboarding experience to even more customers while still ensuring relevant onboarding content to your customers' business needs. But first, Søren is going to tell us a little bit more about the partner and customer journey.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sarah. So you touched on something important there, which is relevant content. And today, what you know as the standard trial experience that you start on dynamics.com doesn't really give you relevant content. Well, not as relevant as it could be, because it's a generic trial. You started on the dynamics.com website, you venture into the Kronos evaluation company, maybe you venture into the non-evaluation company called My Company, and then at some point, we hope you'll contact a Microsoft partner, buy your license, or get started somehow with Business Central. That's the most well-known journey for those who just venture into this on their own and find our website. The other scenario you know, the other journey that you know is when a prospect meets your website. Maybe they saw your solution, they like to get a demo or see that solution in a trial. There's a lot more friction in that scenario because you need to first establish the CSP relationship, that virtual paperwork that needs to happen where you add the trial SKU to the customer and partner center, you load up BC for them, you load any apps you think are relevant for that experience, and you load the configuration that you hand over that experience to the prospect, to the customer. And then at some point, hopefully, they will continue that journey. Now, we can remove the friction in that while still providing that same relevance for the prospect. And this is relatively new, but there's a way to create a digital experience that has your special sauce in it. And now we're going to show you what that's all about. Basically, on a timeline, it could look like this. It ends with the customer going live, of course, but it starts with you profiling the prospect on your website, because to be able to give the most relevant experience, you need to know something about that potential customer. Like, for example, what industry are they in? What kind of business are they running? Maybe what kind of system are they currently using? Are they using Excel or some other competitive product? Now, that's all relevant because you want to stage Business Central as being the great new solution for them. So you need to know about what environment are they operating in right now. So after you profile them, you redirect them to the sign up at dynamics.com. So basically, we spin up the standard trial and we load an app source app that you have decided which one is the most relevant one. And the most important thing is here that whatever the outcome of the profiler was on your website is carried through that journey and is actually available in Business Central, so you can pivot the experience based on the preferences, the expectations from that customer. That means that coming back to the first pillar of our strategy, you saw that being able to be matched with the partner solution from day zero is actually what's taking place here. It's a partner-driven experience at the very first sign-in, at the very first meeting with the product. That means, to Sarah's point, that you know who wants to go to the pool and who wants to go straight to the bar, and you can serve them with what they want. So You can build an experience where the prospect can try out in Kronos. You can even build in an embedded buying experience that will take care of the CSP part of things, and take them through the onboarding piece as well in their own company, and dynamically load all the data that this customer needs in terms of chart of accounts and posting groups and what have you. And then the customer can go live, and your consultants can then focus on the more complex part of that business. To show this in a more schematic way, what happens is you have your questionnaire on your website. The prospects fills in the answers depending on what kind of questions that you ask them. They click a button. They're redirected to the standard trial sign up at dynamics.com. We then spin up the standard trial, and then we add the app that you have told us to add. We then store the information from the questionnaire, the answers, in a system table inside Business Central, and you can use those before the sign-in happens to pivot, add more things to the experience based on what those answers are. This is a really great way to make it customer-centric. So, end of the day, from the user perspective, what they see, they sign up and they see an experience. They don't see that anything else has been added. They just see it as one coherent experience that has your special sauce in it. So here you see a website. This is my partner website. Actually, this is just a Power App that I quickly made to show this, but it will resemble a website. So here I want to ask new prospects that find my website some questions because I want to give them the right experience from day one. So I ask them about what they're interested in doing with Business Central. I ask them about what system they're currently using. And I ask them about their company size. How many do you think will be using Business Central? And in this case, the prospect selects they are interested in biodiversity. And luckily, we have a solution just for that, for tracking biodiversity progress. They also said that they're interested in Excel, or that they come from Excel, sorry. They're used to working with Excel, and there are 10 to 25 users that use Business Central. So we can see why they've grown out of using that Excel spreadsheet. Now, what happens here when they start to trial is that I need to construct the right information to pass along to Business Central in order for Business Central to spin out the right solution. It means that the combination of these choices imply a collection of onboarding elements, checklist, tasks, banner, role center, what have you, in a coherent experience that's bundled together in an app source app. And I want to load that app. So when they have chosen these specific things, I might want to load my solution A. But had they chosen, for example, these three things, I want to load solution B, and so on. And you will be the one who can decide for your company which solutions do we want to load. So I click the Start Trial button as a prospect. I'm directed to the normal sign-up process where I sign into my tenant or sign up to a new tenant. And then the important part here is that all of that context where you came from, the outcome of the questionnaire, is passed along to Business Central in this case. So now we load Business Central. We create the environment with the standard trial on top, but we add your special sauce. We add your app source app and its dependencies. And now is the point where your app is ready to say, oh, they chose Excel as the previous system that they come from. Hey, I might want to load a checklist item that describes why BC is great for Excel users. That kind of thinking. So let's see how that plays out. So let's actually go and see that app. I landed in Business Central after going through the sign up and answering some questions. And I already see a product here that is much more relevant than the standard trial. I see that it has my name on it, so I feel welcome. I also see that it's loaded with an app called Biodiversity Management. So already now, this just speaks my language. It speaks to my expectations. So, and I see there's a clear call to action here. I landed here in an evaluation company, and what we're about to show you here are some examples of what you can do in terms of onboarding. So we're going to talk through some of the onboarding elements in this checklist. This checklist is not intended to be the great checklist for you to onboard a customer, but it's intended to give you inspiration to what kind of elements can you use here. So first of all, use video. In this case, I know that this prospect was interested in biodiversity, so I want to play them a video that will tell them, maybe a snack-sized video that will tell them exactly why BC plus this biodiversity management app is just fantastic for their business. Let's assume that we watched that video for now. We skip this. Maybe I also want to guide them through setup. And for some kinds of modules, for some kinds of solutions, the checklist itself is not really geared to handle many setup elements. We should really strive to have a fairly short checklist. So what we can do is actually, we can branch off the checklist and run, let's say, a sub-checklist here. So what you saw me doing here was actually call the assisted setup list page, but it's filtered now only to contain my setup elements. And that's a great way to say, hey, here are just a number of steps you need to go through to have this module set up. In this case, I just want to show you an example of calling one of these. So here I have an assisted setup that says, for this biodiversity solution, I need to import some plants. So now it's plants. It could be the chart of accounts. It could be posting groups. It could be whatever you want to import in terms of data as an alternative to using configuration packages. So in this case, and you can see I've even branded this assisted setup, I want to import a list of plants from GitHub. So I know that I have a JSON file with plants that I open source on GitHub because I want the community to contribute to this list of plants. I click next, and now we see it's actually now listed in sort of a temporary state. So when I click next, they will actually be imported. This is just a way for me to sort of validate that it looks fine. This is the list that I expect to import. So we'll do that, and we'll click finish. So you see how using an assisted setup, where I could even ask more questions here to clarify which data do I want to load. So you can imagine if a customer is not using doing projects, for example, just leave those accounts out of the chart of accounts, or something else where you don't want to load data that is not used. So think about loading data in a just-in-time fashion this way. So let's just close this one and say that we did this kind of setup for now. Now, the user also said, we use Excel today. I want to speak to that because we have some very cool Excel integrations. So what I want to do is I want to open a page on that plant data that I just imported, and I want to show a great spotlight tour that spotlights the Excel integration capabilities. So I call the spotlight tour here. You as a partner can modify this text, of course, and say, why is this great on this entity to use edit in Excel? So I call out Excel here and say, hey, for example, you can edit this list of plants in Excel and import it back into BC. We're not going to do that right now, but this is just a great way to call out these standard integrations like share to teams and edit in Excel. Let me go back here to the checklist. Now, we also added new things in this release. So if I start now, and this actually is a report that I'm starting, I wanted to provide a super cool report out of the box that is based on Excel layouts. I want them to see a nice graph of all the plants they just imported. The new thing here is you see the teaching tip popping up for the request page, for the report request page, educating me about what can I expect from this report? Why does it exist? Maybe there could be some hints about how to best filter it to get the best experience with this report. But in this case, I just want to see that nice looking report. And what we'll see, it will open in Excel, and it shows me already the plant occurrences last year. So remember, we're tracking biodiversity. I want to keep track of how often has this been reported as been spotted in the wild. So I can see here my list of plants. This is an Excel layout that I provide with my app. So the customer hasn't even needed to do anything. They don't need to do this. When we print this Excel layout, or print this report, we will update the data set and the graph will automatically update. It's a super cool way to do alternative reports for your customers. And you can imagine all kinds of complex or less complex Excel layouts. Let's mark that as complete as well. Now, I can also, of course, manage my plants. So I can start that list of plants as I had before. And one extra cool thing that we added in this release, you already know the teaching tips. You know that you can add markdown to do bold and italics inside teaching tips, and we can also link. So here we link to the insects page. We haven't tracked any insects yet, but I want to take the tour. And here it says I can analyze my top plants. And basically what this does, it opens a query in analysis mode saying that, hey, here's some great data for you. And now we have a teaching tip that educates the user about what is this analysis all about? What is it that you're seeing here? Because now this is fairly simple and I can see that it's sorted by number of occurrences, but it could be a more complex thing. So it could be great that I will be educated about this. And of course, in this release, as I'm sure you'll see, now you can, for example, duplicate it, you give it another name. Let me just call it test. And you can copy a link to this specific analysis and send this to a colleague, send it in Teams, and when they open it, they'll go directly into this analysis because you've just spent a weekend doing it, and it's just a perfect analysis. So use teaching tips to educate users about what are they seeing here. All right, let's go back here. And let's actually go back to the checklist. So let's skip this for now. Finally, in my example here, I actually want the user to go to my website because we have the perfect place for them to land after they have gone through this experience where we can take them a step further. But you could also imagine you could take them into my company, start setting things up for real, add the data, add more videos that guide them through processes, and then go live. So this was just one way to sort of stitch together some onboarding pieces. You get the idea with all these elements. It's up to you to think about how you can stitch them together. Now, the great thing about what you just saw here is that this app that I loaded here is available on GitHub. It's the onboarding sample app, and you can go fork it today and use that as a template to hit the ground running for your onboarding experiences so that you will know which events do you have to subscribe to, where do you do this and where do you do that. Let's just go through the most important ones now. So, what was actually customer-centric to this experience that you just saw? Well, first of all, we loaded a customer role center. There's a few things that's important for doing that. So we loaded a customer role center, we attached it to a role, and we set that role for the current user before they signed in. So you see here the events that are necessary to subscribe to make that happen. You can also see that in the code of the sample app. We also changed the welcome banner text. And again, to Sarah's point before, it's just super important to greet them with the most relevant text and greeting once you see the product. It literally is the first thing that you see. And you see here which event you need to subscribe to do that. And speaking about relevance, it really is the checklist tasks that are doing the work. This is your stage to lead the customer through that first experience. What is it you think they should get excited about? This is where you can do even pre-sales stuff. If they spin up a new trial, you can use this of course, for the real onboarding scenario as well, and you can do both. That really is up to you. Branch off checklists to do more elaborate setups. You saw me opening the assisted setup list filtered to your custom category. And you do that by calling the open assisted setup function in the guide experience item. And what we talked about before about using assisted setups to ask more questions, to clarify which data do you have to load here. In my example, I just loaded the plants. It could be that I wanted to ask the user about, hey, are you interested in trees or flowers only, and then only load that data. You get the idea for your data. Consider open sourcing that data. If you have data that you build but many others also build, would it make sense to pool your resources and open source it? Could be. GitHub is a great source for those kind of things. Again, call out the spotlight tours. Shine a big bright spotlight on those core integrations, Excel and Teams, for your custom entities. It's a great way to generate some excitement. And one of the reasons we hear customers investing in Business Central is the whole ecosystem of surrounding apps from Microsoft. Educate users with teaching tips on reports. It's a great way to give them some hints about what this report all about. Why should they care about it? And how should they maybe set some initial filters to get the best outcome? And with other cheating tips, you can use the about title and about text properties to do that in AL. Again, use Excel layouts. You can do stunning layouts and provide the Excel layout file out of the box with your app, so the customer doesn't have to do anything except but print the report. There's some great examples, and there are more guidance at this aka.ms BC Excel samples link. Check out the guidance there for more samples and some tips and tricks. And the final thing I want to call out here is use cheating tips on query objects as well. It's a good experience to get some guidance on, hey, what is this analysis that I just opened directly from another page? What is it all about? So I talked a lot about these different onboarding elements now. I'd like to learn more about some of the guidance and best practices that I should think about and you should think about when you go and build these onboarding experiences. So Sarah, can you take us through that?
I would love to do that. So now we have established that when the users arrive at the role center in Business Central, the banner is there to greet them and to really be this entrance for where to get started. So when creating content for the banner, keep in mind to keep the welcome message short and clear and to make the user really discover and want to follow that call to action. And once the user clicks the action, in this case, show demo tours, the checklist shows up in the banner, providing overview and structure of the relevant activities, guiding the users successfully through discovering key values in Business Central. So, as Søren said, the checklist is really the main onboarding piece that allows you to surface the different onboarding components and orchestrate what the customer goes through. But just remember that the user can move and navigate freely between the tasks and might even skip some of them to revisit them later. So you can't always guarantee that they follow the order that you decided. And also consider the difference between a checklist for the eval trial situation where you want the users to experience the value propositions and the go to live checklist, where the purpose is to get Business Central set up in the perfect way for the customer. So when putting together the checklist for the evaluation and trial, keep in mind that the customer's patience and maybe even time is really short. That's why we also have the little minute indicator on every task. So you want to put together the checklist for evaluation that is really short and with as little friction as possible. So it's important to try to avoid complex tasks for the users to not feel stuck. Maybe start with a smaller task first that gives them an understanding of Business Central as well as a feeling of success and progression in the checklist. Because we know that builds confidence in users to go and explore further. And also consider if you can use a good mix of content, as Søren said, so not have all videos or all spotlight tours, but a good mix creates a more engaging experience. Now, the checklist used for Go Live has a slightly different goal. Now it's actually about setting Business Central and the user up for doing work. And the checklist items can be a little more involved, related to setting up users, permissions, and so on. And in that case, it's really important that you consider the user's role and make the checklist role-oriented. So if a user isn't responsible for permissions, showing a task about permissions would not be a good choice. Also, keep setup as short as possible. Pre-configure as much as you can. What we've found also is that if you have too many checklist items, it doesn't work so well. The checklist is designed for 5, 6, maybe 7. And if you have more than that, you can wrap those up in an assisted setup list, as Søren showed, and guide the users that way. So, as Søren showed, spotlight tours are a really powerful way of showing some of the key selling points in Business Central, such as Teams and Excel. And the superpower of this pattern is really that it allows users not only to discover it, but actually go and try it out with just 2 steps and hopefully get wowed. At the moment, spotlight tours are all about Teams and Excel. What is up to you to decide is on which pages you want to call out that particular feature, in case it's relevant on the pages you have built. You can use the introduction text on the first step to explain the value it brings on that particular page. And remember, when you're at a new place, it's sometimes a little difficult to know where you are, so give a little hand there and introduce where you are. The second step, it's about pointing to that action where the user can go and try it out. Once users get more hands-on with the UI and they try out the scenarios on their own, teaching tips are a valuable method for educating users about what they can do in a particular page. Again, when creating content for these, be brief. Make sure the user understands the key value of the page, as if you would introduce it in 1 sentence to a customer. Why is this page so great? And not how to use it. If users want to learn more, make sure they can find relevant documentation about your page in help instead. Now, if you want users to discover key elements on a page, the tour with teaching tips are a better choice because they can point to a particular action or field and provide an explanation. But remember, you can't use teaching tips to prescribe a certain business process. The sequence of the teaching tips is controlled by the order they appear on the page, top to bottom, which makes sense because users view pages from top to bottom, and you should already have arranged your fields in terms of priority from top to bottom. And again, shorter and fewer tips is usually better. If you try to communicate too much in these in-UI elements, you might not get the result that you intended. The users will typically get tired of balloons and teaching tips and maybe skip it altogether. So narrow it down and think about the 3 most important things users really need to discover and understand. And then use the tooltips for the other explanations. So, as mentioned in the beginning, one of our main goals with the onboarding framework has been to remove as much friction as possible and avoid blocking the way forward to users having a successful start with Business Central. But when getting hands-on, really using a product, people might run into errors. So in this release, we have improved our error handling further and introduced actionable errors, providing an easier way for users to unblock themselves in context at the field level, such as refreshing the page or accepting the recommended actions. And to learn more about actionable errors and how you as a partner or developer can leverage these new patterns, you should check out the session about productivity features in the client. And as always, you can find more documentation on Microsoft Learn. And with that, over to you, Søren, to tell us what's next.
Thank you, Sarah. So talking about actions, of course you have an action now to go and uptake these patterns for error handling in your apps, but so do we. We also have actions on spreading out these patterns to more scenarios in the base app and our first-party apps. And talking about actions, here are some actions for you to conclude the session. If you want to build an onboarding app, you can start right away with forking the sample app that's on GitHub. So look for onboarding sample app for GitHub in the Microsoft repos, and you can hit the ground running and start using that as a template to figure out which events do I subscribe to, where do I change the banner text, and so on. And start to think about how you can profile your website visitors. You can easily test this out, for example, with the sample Power Apps and build it. You don't have to do it on the web. And once you sort of got the hang of it and how to produce what we call the sign-up context, and you can read more about that in the documentation, by the way. Once you've got the hang about that, then add it to your website. Start profiling customers, load the right solution so that they can be matched with what they expect to see. On the business side of things, you could also consider how you're offering your services. We see great examples and great success with partners who bundle up the whole onboarding, implementation, data, support, licenses in one monthly recurring fee per user. It's super easy. It's super easy for customers to get to know their total cost of ownership that way. And actually seems like a very viable business model. Again, check out the documentation. Everything we've talked about here today is documented here at ak.ms/bc onboarding. And finally, maybe most importantly for anything that you do with customers, use application insights to track telemetry. It's not hard to set up. It's super cheap, and actually it will pay for itself if you use it as an upsell and proactive assistance for your customers. That's a bold statement, but we actually think there's a lot more that can be done with telemetry and application insights. As for other sessions, Sarah already mentioned that you should check out the new productivity features in the web client and what's new in telemetry and adding existing table fields to optimize your pages are just great examples and related content to this session. So go check them out. Ultimately, to close out, if you have a question, contact us on Yammer. That's where all of us are. And there's a great partner community there on Yammer as well. It's likely that if you have an issue, someone else has run into that same issue as well. So let's get the conversation going there. Also, join the public conversation on Twitter or X. And if you're looking for any resources that you can't find, but you think there's a resource out there related to Business Central, chances are that it will exist at this aka.ms/bc all alias here. If you think something is missing in the product, give us the idea. Submit it to ak.ms/bc ideas. And finally, engage with us in the office hours calls on these specific topics. So check the calendar for office hours calls at ak.ms/bc office hours. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to this presentation and for your attention. Remember that you can check out all the other Business Central launch event sessions on demand. Thank you very much.